On this episode of Breaking Bullying, we're going to go back to episode 1 to define bullying. I'm going to hit that music and get started.
On this first episode, I think it's important for us to define exactly what is bullying. And to do that, we're going to bring on a professional who it is part of her job to deal with these issues. Joining us now is Fiona Swanson, a clinical social worker for over 10 years who deals with adults and children and is very familiar with bullying, and I think has had some experience herself in dealing with it. Hello, Fiona.
Hi.
Tell us a little about yourself, a little about your experiences. How did you get into social work? Your specialization?
Okay. Um, so I have been in social work for about 10 years now. Um, Before that, I was a hairstylist and um, kind of always knew that I wanted to do something having to do with helping people. And it ended up being social work. So I started out working in a hospital setting, working with families, helping them get ready to discharge or deal with sort of the stressors of being in the hospital. Um, and then I got my clinical licensure and started working with patients, adults, children, families on more of a therapeutic basis. So working with them in therapy. Um, and then I switched to school social work about a year ago, because I felt like working so much with kids and adolescents, um, a lot of the main stressors they were dealing with had to do with the school setting. Um, and oftentimes, most often, it had to do with bullying or peer conflicts. And so I thought it would be helpful if I could work in that setting with students.
Well, let's talk about bullying a little bit. What exactly is it? What's the difference between bullying versus, say, harassment versus, say, just being plain rude?
Mm. Sure. So being rude is when a person is maybe accidentally says something unkind or accidentally bumps into somebody, and doesn't apologize. Um, or maybe says something that wasn't very considerate and might have hurt their feelings, like, oh, that's a different haircut, you know. So that would be being rude. um, then there's also being mean, which is a little bit more intentional, um, kind of saying something to hurt somebody's feelings, but typically that would be just maybe on a one-time basis. When it moves into bullying, when it's done more um, intentionally, so there's purpose, um, and it's usually planned. Um, and then also when there is a little bit of a power differential. So, for example, um, at school, let's say a kid comes to school, um, 10 minutes before they're let into the school. So they're on the playground, and every time they get dropped off, there's this group of 3 or 4 kids who maybe are like a little bit older or bigger, or even just the fact that it's a group, that gives them more power than the kid who just got dropped off. And if they every time they see this student say rude things to them or tease them, then that's on a consistent basis, then that would be bullying, if that makes sense.
It does. And another thing I'm hoping to get just a little bit of clarification on, if only because they're in the same realm, but they're not the same thing. How would you define the difference between bullying and harassment?
Mhm. Um, and so they can overlap. Certainly, harassment is when the bullying or the teasing is related to a person's to their sex, their race, or the color of their skin, whether or not they might have a disability. Um, gender identity or sexual orientation. Um, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something as well, maybe their religion. So when it has to do with any of those factors, then it is defined as harassment. Um, and it still can be bullying, but I think if you look at your state laws, that's kind of where they've got that discrepancy. And I think that there's more, a little bit more like legal. I can't think of the right word. Um,
Precedent, ramification.
yeah, yes, legal ramifications for harassment, but also for bullying too.
In your experiences as a social worker, do you feel the incidents of bullying are on the rise?
So that is a very good question. I definitely think cyberbullying is is on the rise, and you know, um, I was in school. Let's see, I don't want to give away my age, but I graduated about 20 years ago, so a while ago, before social media and cell phones. And I think back to middle school, which was a very hard time for me. And I would say that I was probably the target of some bullying, definitely some transition in friends, and then was targeted. And I think about how hard that was. But yet now, when you add social media and texting, group texts, and all of these other ways for people to talk about you or spread rumors or record you and post it, I think how lucky I was, how relieved I am that that it wasn't that much worse. Yet it was still really hard. So I would say that it's much more intense now. Um, I've been working um, with students and youth or professionally for about 10 years, but even when I was doing hair, I would work with a lot of like teenagers, and I guess I can't speak to the like statistics as far as whether or not it's increased. I know it's kind of always been bad, and it depends on where you go to school and those policies and that type of thing.
Well, online certainly takes the in-person portion. Like you had to put in physical effort to do it, or at the very least, pick up a phone and crank call somebody. Versus now, you can just
Right.
simply you know, find their IM, find their Instagram, and just go
Yeah.
at it. Now,
Yeah, at least when we were kids, because I'm roughly the same age as you, Fiona. When we were kids, at least when we leave school, the bullying goes away. It stops for a bit. We got a break. But these days, kids can't escape it. It's like you said, cyberbullying is really tough to do for a lot of kids. And kids want to be connected with social media as well, play their games and so forth. So I do think that for myself, I guess I was a little bit more luckier when I was getting bullied because at least when I left school, it stopped
Mhm.
for a day.
considering how easy it's become to just go online and rail at somebody, it's very easy to bully someone. What can parents do to be more cognizant that their particular child might be getting bullied? Because not every parent recognizes it. And sometimes, even if the child comes up to the parents and says something, they don't fully grasp the magnitude of what their child is saying to them.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. I think um, that is one thing when I'm grateful for my professional experience because in meeting with kids and then especially like adolescents and then teenagers one on one, I hear what's happening, and then when I will talk with the parents, sometimes they have no idea the extent, or they say, "Oh, their friends are good kids. They just do this sometimes," but they have no idea what's happening or how cruel it is.
Boys will be boys.
And some right, or how girls are, that kind of thing, um, or and so they sometimes even encourage their child to stay friends with this group. Like, let's say it's a small town and they grew up being friends, but yet, the group is kind of torturing their child, but they're not believing it. So I think that it is really important for parents to watch for changes in behavior or personality with their child. For example, let's say their child usually loves going to their like after school program, whatever that after school care is, and they're always happy to go. And then all of a sudden they say, "Oh, can you just pick me up? Can you pick me up early? I don't want to stay." Um, or they are calling home, going to the nurse a lot, saying, "I have a headache," or "I'm sick, I need to go home." Or they are not wanting to go to school. Those are clear signs that something's going on. So I encourage parents wholeheartedly to um, not just dismiss it as kids being lazy or just being teenagers. Make sure to find out. Okay, so who are you spending your time with, and also encouraging parents to look at their children's phones, look at their online activity. You know, um, Make it like normalize that from as soon as they're young enough or old enough to be online. Say, okay, you gotta quick show me what you've been doing, or you gotta show me your account, so that as they get older, they realize, yep, that's just a normal thing. My mom or my dad's just protecting me. I gotta show them who I'm talking to. Um, so just kind of always recognizing any signs that your child is avoiding places they used to go or isolating more.
Now, if I were to approach my,
So,
oh, go ahead, Tim.
go ahead. So Fiona, if I have a child that I suspect bullying, what is I don't know how to come off. Some kids don't want to admit that they're being bullied, even though you can see it. Is there like a good question to ask your child that would get you to open up to them? Instead of going up to my child and say, "Hey, Johnny, are you being bullied today?" Do you take them out to like a private setting, have some dinner? What's a good technique to get them to open up to you, to trust you? Because a lot of it is kids are afraid that, oh no, they're going to call that kid's parents and I'm really going to get it.
Right.
So is there a good question or tactic we can get our kids to open up
Yeah.
to come clean about the bullying?
Yep. Very good question, because you're absolutely right. Surprisingly, it's a child's sort of instinct to shut down and just try to say, nope, everything's fine. So I think that it's helpful to really try to connect with your child. And so, like you said, maybe take them out to eat or just spend some one-on-one time with them, um, so that they know that you're there, and even just saying, "Hey, I'm noticing something. I'm noticing a change in you." Or, when I was a kid, sometimes people said mean things to me, and I didn't know how to respond. Does that ever happen to you? Um, and honestly, as a parent, so this is my experience as a parent, I found it helpful to sometimes, when I go pick up my kid from after school care, try to sort of get there and just watch a little bit to see what I can see before coming to get them, and so I can observe what's going on, because I actually found out one time doing that of a little bit of that going on, a little bit of intimidation from another student to my son that he hadn't told me about, and I saw it, and then I was able to ask him about it, and remind him, like, we're gonna work through this together. I'm not gonna do anything that makes you uncomfortable. We're gonna figure out how you can be safe and how you can stand up for yourself. So really not trying to rush it, trying to help them feel calm and safe, and then have them participate in coming up with a plan for next steps.
Well, that's a very good point. So maybe they don't open up to me the first time, but second time, third time, as parents, just be patient, work with your child. And like you said, I might have to go down to school and monitor them for a bit. Just, I won't let them know I'm doing that,
Mhm.
but just sit back and kind of watch. And then maybe I have a, but then again, like how do you go back and tell your kid, like, well, okay, I saw this happening. I don't want my kid to lose trust in me that I'm spying on them though either.
Right.
So sometimes it's kind of like, it can be a little iffy with your kids to break that trust too.
Yeah. Well, and the example I gave, it was more just kind of me pulling up and then seeing them. I didn't stay for more than like a minute or two.
Yep, I get. Yep, yep.
So,
I'm just saying if but your kids used to picking you up. If I was to go pick up my kid, which I don't ever do,
oh, sure.
and then I go to school one day to kind of sit back and watch, then my daughter goes, "Are you spying on me?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I don't want to
probably
break that trust either. Yeah.
right.
I mean,
Yeah, and you probably can't. I suppose it's. I don't want to give the message that it's okay to go and watch your kids at recess necessarily, because I don't know that that's allowed. But um, more just kind of taking every opportunity you can to observe in the moment naturally. And also if you have concerns, their teacher is there. Email them, call them, say, hey, this is what I'm noticing. What are you seeing? Because either the teacher or the school social worker or counselor will or should take that seriously and investigate. Um,
would there be any value in, as a parent, saying to your child, you know, little Bobby, little Timmy, I just want you to know that when I was your age, I was bullied. I went through something similar. If something's going on, I don't want you to be afraid that I won't understand or I won't believe you because I've been through it. I do understand. I do believe you.
mhm. Absolutely. I think I think that that would be absolutely helpful. Um, and because when I was a kid, sort of, my mom's advice was, well, just ignore it, and really that doesn't work. She was doing the best she
Just
could, and
smile.
it
They'll get bored.
yeah, yeah, well, just pretend you don't hear it, but that can often, I mean, I've rarely seen that work. It's often sort of like ammunition, sort of, for it to continue.
Yep, didn't work when I was a
Um,
kid.
yeah.
So,
So,
what
mhm,
if the parent manages to get this conversation going? They're beginning to talk to the child. What advice can the parent give the child to help that child who is being bullied? What can I say to little Timmy to help him?
mhm. I think that I think really to remember that our first goal is to listen, to help our child feel heard, because sometimes we go quick into advice mode and our kids shut down, or they're like, well, no, that's not going to work. So we want to make sure we listen, ask them to explain what happens and like how it makes them feel, and then just sort of problem solve. Say, okay, so what do you think might help, or what would you like to do? If you had a superpower to fix this, what would happen? Um, and so getting them involved in the conversation. Um, then some tips that I often recommend and do with my own kids is I say, okay, let's practice how we could respond. How can we make a joke about something? Can we sort of laugh it off if someone makes a mean comment? Um, is this something where we need to practice assertively saying, no, I don't like that, stop? Because sometimes our kids, I don't think, know that they need to directly say, no, stop, because we want to do that first. Um, because sometimes I think that initial instinct is to just sort of like giggle and laugh along, which then the bully can sort of say, well, they never said they didn't like it, or it was just a joke. So listening and involving them in the plan, practicing role playing how they're going to respond, and then also making a plan for who they can connect with. Would you, so as the parent, after you do these things, I'm going to ask how it goes. And then who do you want us to talk to? Will it be your teacher or your counselor? What other adult at school can help us with this so that they can help you when you're in school?
So that brings me to our next question, which is, in some cases, in quite a few cases actually, the school is not just not helpful, they're almost to some degree complicit in their lack of ability to want to deal with the situation. What advice, what services are there for parents who try to approach the school and the school makes excuses, doesn't help, um, just stand by and watch because it's not their problem?
Hmm. Um, and first of all, I do want to say that my experience with schools is, luckily, it's been positive. I have seen documentaries and I have heard about, some schools that clearly aren't taking it seriously. And so, yes, I'm going to give you some resources for that. But I also want to say that I have seen, and I work in some schools that will be proactive and they recognize that um, there are laws in place. I mean, you look up our Minnesota statute, and there's anti-bullying laws and safe and supportive schools acts that mandate certain policies schools have to follow. So I think for the parents, to look up, there's two really good resources online, and one is stopbullying.gov, and that's a federal kind of website and resource center with lots of really good information about um, how to talk to your child, how to connect with the school, what are the next steps if you're not getting anywhere. Also, Pacer, PACER, they have a National Bullying Prevention Center, and their website is fantastic. They have letters sort of written out so that you can start to document, you know, reaching out to the school and telling them exactly what's happening, and then to start to build a legal case if the school is not responding to make action happen. Um, but I would really encourage people to look at those resources, and there are more, but those are kind of like the two that seem pretty good to me. And just don't stop, don't stop um, advocating because you have to for your child.
So, another question: if your child is being bullied and you are aware of the other child's parents, as a parent, should you approach them? Did you try to have a dialogue with the other child's parent, or is that just asking for issues?
Hmm. I think so. I feel like I don't have a good evidence based answer. I'm uh, guessing there's probably some research out there that would help us know which way to go. I know that in some experiences with families I've worked with, the parents have connected with the other parents, particularly if it's like a smaller town, and that has been helpful to an extent.
How trying is it on you when you have a child who is so obviously in distress?
Um, you mean like when I'm working with a child who's in distress?
Yeah, when you have to deal with when there's a heavy situation where, um, I assume, and I could be assuming wrong, that in some situations there's only a limited amount that you can do to help.
Mm.
And sometimes that situation doesn't get better. How does that weigh on you?
Um, I feel as though I I do feel like I've been able to help at least somewhat. When I was working like in a outpatient clinic and would see kids for therapy, um, we would talk through strategies, and but I didn't see them as often. So, and then we would maybe they would not end up coming. So I don't know that I ever um, worked with somebody where it clearly was like out of hand, and I couldn't we couldn't get through it. But that's but I don't know everything um, as far as how things went on a day to day. I just know when I was seeing them in the school, I feel grateful that the schools that I'm working at right now, um, that there's good people there that take it seriously and will work to maybe change some things around, um, make it so they're not able to be one on one with each other. And we're able to meet with that student and help build them up. I think that's one thing I want to make sure to say as parents, as anybody who works at a school, as anybody who works with children, you can build them up whenever you see them. Point out what's great about them. Point out how just awesome of a kid they are. Point out that they are inherently worthwhile, right? Because that's what we want them to know. Um, that no matter what's happening, how someone else is treating us isn't about us. It's about them. And we are still worthwhile. We are still kind. We are still friendly. And we can still make our own friends. The more social connections a child and an adult has, the less vulnerable they are to bullying and the less vulnerable they are to a lot of other health risks, because social relationships.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree because as a parent, we're the first ones that's going to build up our kids' confidence first. I see a lot of parents at sports, some are even in my school. A kid will break a board or have a huge achievement in class. You turn around and look at the parent, they're sitting on their phone, not paying attention to it, and the kid's confidence just drops. The parent missed it. And that's kind of us on parents too, because as a parents, we live such a busy life. We some now that parent could be working on their phone. I don't know the whole story, but I think when we as you stated, as parents, if we're taking our kid to an activity, we should be engaged with that activity as well, because that's activity is there not just for them to become a professional player someday. That activity main goal is to build their confidence up. And if we can't give them that instant praise, that kid in the future can be like, well, why should I try anymore?
Mhm.
No one cares. And they get all these negative thoughts going through their head as well. But as parents, we're the first ones to work on our kids' confidence.
Mhm.
I think that was a great point that you're starting to make.
Mhm.
In
Because
closing,
even if we can't fix what's going on for them at school, we can focus on the positive with them, and we can build that up. We can do those positive affirmations. We can do that practice. Okay, how are you going to respond when I say this? Okay, let's practice a joke. So you got a good joke to maybe tell to sort of like break the ice. I mean, we can be working on all those things, even though we can't always fix what's on the outside world.
as we're coming to a close, is there any final thoughts that you would like to relay out to the audience about just in general about bullying? Any particular bit of advice that hasn't been covered by any of our questions?
Um, I would say um, encouraging kids to also speak up when they see others being bullied, because if you because that helps contribute to a safe environment at their school, and that helps contribute to less likelihood they'll be bullied. And um, so I think encouraging kids to say something or reach out to a child if they see that they don't have anybody to sit with, encouraging our kids to build relationships and friendships, even if um, even if they're not the best of friends, like getting just encouraging your kids to be involved in things because those social connections are going to protect them, you know. Um, and also doing that as parents, because they see what we model. Um, so I think it's so helpful to look at those proactive, preventative strategies, um, in addition to responding if it's happening.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate you coming on and defining bullying for us.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was my pleasure.